As promised, I have Thorsten Arnold standing by to talk about Regenerate Grey Bruce, a ambitious and positive and progressive project that is rolling out across the two counties. Thorsten is currently a market gardener, co-owner of Persephone Market Garden, and was instrumental in establishing the Eat Local Grey Bruce Cooperative, and we're going to see a short presentation from them later today, and is currently working on this project, and I'm just going to invite Thorsten to talk about it right now. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Philly, for inviting me and for giving me an opportunity to speak about this project. Regenerate Grey Bruce, this question, where's our community's landscape heading? Just about myself, you can check out my blogs at thorstenarnold.com, and I talk about restoring soil sponge, agroecology, climate change, climate resilience, and topics like that. Landscape narrative. I think most of us know this picture, and it shows on the left side healthy soil under permanent pasture, which towards the right becomes more and more degraded. And as the soil is degrading, you can see that the water is not going into the groundwater anymore, but it's flowing off as runoff at the surface, and it's taking a whole lot of erosion with it. And if we go to council and say, I don't like this soil without life, this degraded soil, then council doesn't really know what to do about it, because how can you fight degradation? That's a really difficult question. Look at it the other way. We can say, oh, on the right side, we have soil without life. As we are getting dead organic matter or living soil and living organic matter, then our water cycle becomes healthier because life changes the water cycle. And to me, that framing of a problem totally reframes the problem that we are dealing with, and we have to ask, how can we foster life so that it takes care of our landscape and our water cycle? So the same way of looking at the same picture, but from a different direction, it changes the solutions that we can see, or the management task that we see. We can either fight degradation or we can nurture life. Very different narrative, very different framing. If we then look at urban landscapes, we can even see that in the same city, same day, same time, the same or two different streets can have very different climate. The temperature difference between these two streets is about 10 degrees in the air and much more at the surfaces. And why is that? Some would say, oh, there's shading. But in addition to the shading, like a shade cloth wouldn't do this temperature change. It's the transpiration. Remember how life creates a water cycle, and it then transpires it, and this transpiration changes the local climate. So this is not global climate change between the two streets, but certainly the living landscape is different. And it's this life that I'm talking about. At a larger scale, life even changes the wind. Here we have a slide that's from pilot education. And you can see that over a plowed field where that's black, that's heating up, it's dry, there's no transpiration, you have uplifts and a totally different wind field than under a marsh or a forest. And again, life is changing wind. And this is, to me, one of the most amazing facts of living in this earth. And with this in mind, the Greenbelt is an area that creates a belt of life around the GTA, around Toronto, and all the way up to Tobermory along the Niagara Escarpment. The Greenbelt Foundation is set out to protect this living landscape so that the services from life benefit us humans and nature. So the Greenbelt Foundation in 2022 has focused on creating native or increasing native trees, shrubs, and other vegetation in order to contribute to biodiversity and create greater climate resilience for Ontario's residents, and has funded a project in our area that was titled Regenerate Grey Bruce Towards a Landscape Narrative of Hope. So what is that? We've already seen that narrative, whether we fight degradation or we nurture life, really changes our options for action. And also in history and science, the relationship between nature and humans and society has really changed. This narrative once said, oh, there's wilderness and then there's human civilization. And a bit later, in the 80s and 90s, a lot of people saw how wilderness was disappearing, and we looked at nature that resisted human development. In the 2000s, we talk about nature for people, what nature is doing for us. But only in the recent years, we are talking about nature and people forming one system. We're talking about climate resilience, adaptation. We're talking about socio-ecological systems. So our narrative between the relationship of society and nature has totally changed in the last 50 years. A landscape narrative is a story that enables humans to make sense of space, nature, and community. The meaning of a landscape narrative doesn't just relate in what is being told, but also how it is told. And a narrative defines who we are. The narrative is inextricably linked to our identity, both in individual stories and in correlative stories by which communities of any scale are formed. It's a quotation from Philip. So nature is much more than just a story. It defines who we are. If we think we're here to survive, we have to fight for our survival, that's very different than if we say we are parents who have to nurture a child and nurture nature. It just changes how we look in the world and how we act in this world. The narrative of hope is something that is a meaning-making tool that provides actors with a compass of action and the confidence to act. If we don't have a compass for our action, we don't know where to go. So we need kind of a direction so we can test our decisions, whether we are going in this direction that's desirable. So once we know where we want to go, we can manage for it rather than fighting some degradation. So it's essential for our capacity to manage a favorable outcome for individuals and communities, and especially if circumstances are changing, for example, with growing population in our area or climate change. So we don't have to go very far. These pictures are from Ontario about 100 years ago. Large areas of southwestern Ontario were turning into a desert because people have cut down so many trees that the wind took away the air, the water took away the air. There's 3 to 4 meters, feet of soil that was just washed out, as you can see in the pictures below here. And the Ontario population has decided that this is not a desirable state for our community, especially after Hurricane Hazel really made a point that how dangerous it is for our society to have such a degraded ecological state around it. And so Ontarians changed. Ontarians choose to regenerate Ontario. They planted trees and they have managed quite well to reestablish forest cover in many areas. So we can change and can do that actively. All of this is kind of a foreplay to our project. We are trying to formulate a narrative of hope for our community by interviewing leaders who identify themselves to us, and also some of them we seek ourselves. And secondly, we want to establish a network of leaders, businesses that offer regeneration services as people are moving into this area and buy new homes. So we give them an opportunity to do the right thing and do it easily. We are looking for practicing mentors. That's people who do regeneration at home and would like to help others to do it as well. And we want to establish a network of educators. Maybe we focus on school teachers so that they can explain the role of landscapes for our community. This project has two phases. The first year is about convening leaders of thought and action. And the second phase then is about reaching out into our community. And in between the two phases, I certainly hope that there's a party to bring together all those leaders of thought and action in person so that we can actually see each other. It's kind of unimaginable after COVID. But yeah, that's it. If you're a local resident and a practitioner interested in mentoring, or an educator who wants to be involved, or business offering regeneration services, please get in touch. We're at a very early stage of our project still, but we are convening a lot of people and trying to get a lot of interested people together. Or you can simply write us your narrative of landscape. That's an experience with your family, youth memories of landscape, your connection with landscape and community. And yeah, you can write an interesting or funny story. You can write an experience and observation of changes. Tell us your feelings, emotions, your fears, aspirations, and maybe also what you want to leave for the next generation. I had a funny interview about a lady from the States whose family co-owns a cottage. And since it's the third generation, it's like 30 owners now. And they try to landscape the garden of this cottage together. And some really like lawn, and some really like neglect and wilderness. So I think in this microcosm of this cottage family, it already shows how many different conflicts and interests come together, and how we have to work together and really come together in our values in order to manage for everybody's likings. Yeah, if you have any ideas that need supporters, please reach out. If you want to get involved in a project, please reach out. And yeah, if you have any questions, please ask to Philly. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Thorsten. And thank you for providing your contact information. I can also encourage people to visit the Sustainability Project website for more. I hope that there's going to be additional information about this project coming on that website.